Excellent. I'm Sarah Mintey. I'm the founder and CEO of Developing Experts. 3.5 years ago, I founded the company and I set out to change education. That was the start point. In 2016, a CBI report identified that 89% of primary teachers do not feel confident about teaching science and mathematics. That's not a very good starting point given the shortage of engineers that this nation alone faces. At the moment, 30% of energy is actually produced by wind farms. By 2030, 60% of all energy will be produced by wind farms. And in order to make that happen, the energy sector as a whole needs another 33,000 engineers. That's just energy. Yesterday I was at an event called Railed Live over near Stratford, and they've got a similar problem. They can't recruit the skilled young people that they need in order to fill the gaps. So I started off with the intention of solving one problem, but it's morphing into something more than that. And so the journey is getting more exciting as I go. And so what we essentially do is we enable a non-specialist teacher to teach science at the moment, but eventually all subjects, to teach a specialist subject with confidence and ease. And we do that in such a way where the teacher, the parent and the child are learning alongside each other, and they're hearing firsthand from experts. And so if you're doing a lesson on rocks, you'll hear from a geologist. If you're doing a lesson on space, you'll hear from an astronaut. At the moment, we've got over 150 different professors and doctors from industry, from universities, who appear in our platform. And that range of expert is increasing all the time. Now, to date, as a company, I've raised just shy of £1.5 million. And so I've got a little bit of experience, like Sham, of raising funds. It took ages to raise that first round, and then it got easier as the story grew and evolved. Now what the board, I have to say, I didn't appreciate how influential and important having a good board is. So I've got Patrick Smith as my chairman. So Norwich Union Direct, he was responsible for floating it. Then David Scousel, we've heard Airbnb mentioned a few times, he's on their board. Then Barry used to own Aspels, and he sold that last year, so he's experienced of closeout, which is great. Paul, he's a secondant at the moment, but he used to be the CMO of Promethean, which is one of the largest edtech brands in the world. And then Shane is my co-founder, but also the tech geek that enabled us all to get going. So essentially, what our product is, you get a snapshot here. What we do is just really make a lesson come to life. So each lesson has typically around 30 clips of film, but it's all practical and hands-on. It's all about making sure kids have an immersive experience that really ignites a passion for learning. And so each lesson comes with lesson plans, handouts, the risk assessments, the practicals, and everything you need in order to actually make learning come to life. Each child and parent also has a login from home, so they can revisit the lesson and learn for themselves how it's been taught, what's been taught, and what they've got to do to support their child. About 25% of parents don't feel confident about teaching their child to do the homework. That's for a variety of reasons. It might be because it wasn't around in their day, or it might be because they're struggling with literacy levels, or they're not sure what formula that was used to actually teach the concept being taught. I mean, the UK, England, doesn't actually have a formula policy. So maths formula is taught in multiple ways across this nation. And so if you've been taught as a parent one way, it's impossible sometimes to actually help your child when they've been taught another way. And so it makes it really hard. So what I set out to do is to actually make sure a government could centrally set, track and monitor the performance of each child, class, teacher year group, school, group of schools in real time, so that policy, money invested into different strategies is based on real-time data. It gives the government confidence what's being taught, to the standards being taught. There's total transparency. If you've got a transient population, this country, 20% of kids going to school move in during their school time life cycle, if you like. So if you've started in year 3 and you've moved to another school, you might miss half your curriculum. And then you end up repeating it in some scenarios. So if you're a kid in a forces family, moving all around the world, you could miss whole years because you've got Key Stage 2 covering 4 years of education, where it's pretty fluid how some teachers and schools interpret the national curriculum. So basically what we wanted to do is just make sure everything is standardised in a way that makes everything simple and clear, and it's transparent as well. In India, it's really corrupt. So you've got 1.5 million schools, a third have vacant positions, a third have positions filled by teachers with fraudulent qualifications, and a third have teaching staff that are legitimate. And so typically in some of the rural communities, you might have just 2 staff, qualified teaching members of staff, to teach 1,000 kids. So you can see the problems that we've set out to solve. Now it's been a long time coming, but we've just got to that point where we've won our first government contract. And so on Saturday, I fly out to China, and we are having a trial. Now I don't know whether the trial is for 1,000 schools or 3,000 schools, but it will either be worth 2.2 million or 6.6 million. And the follow-on contract, the government is going to sell our product for us, which is great. So there's 23 or 4 provinces in China, then there's sub-provinces, and they're anticipating selling our product to 2, 3, 4 provinces in year 2. And given there are around 20,000 schools per province, if you do the maths quite quick, it's massive. So a typical primary school out there is 1,500 kids. A typical high school is around 750. So we are basically launching our products in around 6 months' time. It's going to be translated into Mandarin, so they've pre-ordered. And what I'm doing is just finalising the quantity, whether it's 1 or 3. But then we've got a high net worth investor who's going to bankroll it all. So the deal is she gets 80%, we get 20%. But the government actually wants us to produce all subjects K-12. So if you think the maths through, in year 2, we're looking at around 60 million, year 3, 120 million on one subject, modelled on 1 province. If we get 3 provinces, it gets interesting. We've got a number of partnerships, but I suppose the key thing just to share with you is our selling model to schools. We started off wanting to sell direct to schools, actually wanted to sell direct to governments. But in order to prove a concept, you have to have some money coming in. So we were selling to schools, and we weren't making any money because it was taking so long to knock on a head's door and get an audience to share the product and show the product and what it did. Because the immediate reaction is, well, I've got teachers. Why do I need something that's going to substitute a teacher? But they don't realise how important it is to actually have the product that we've created for them until they see it. When they see it, it's fine. We get a 90% conversion rate. The actual people who don't purchase, it's for budgetary reasons. So I changed our strategy 10 weeks ago. Of how we're going to sell. So now we actually give our product away, and so we actually work with corporates and we sell our proposition as part of a CSR strategy and solution for them. And basically we'll go in and say, look, do you want to actually support the schools in your local community? Do you want to invest in your future workforce? Do you want to actually make sure that you're contributing to what that young person who could potentially end up working for you looks like? And it's working. So typically once a week, I'll go to an exhibition. I'll get 20, 30 leads in a day. Then I'll spend the rest of my week converting those into appointments. So today I scheduled 5 appointments. So since 10 weeks ago, whatever it was, creating the strategy, we've now got three large corporates, brands that you'd recognise, saying yes, they want it. So we're just waiting for contracts to come through. I anticipate our revenue turnover next month being 200,000. And so based on the actual funnel of how things are going, so your quarter's a very exciting time. I'd love to answer and field any questions. I've missed out half my slides, but that doesn't really matter. And that's probably about time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about right.
Yeah. Thank you. We've just been voted best EdTech product in Europe as well, which is quite exciting.
Was that was, yeah.